this video, I will be discussing the 8 most disappointing books that I read in the month of November. I did already speak about my 8 favorite books that I read, so if you do want to hear about some books that I would recommend to you, I will go ahead and leave that video linked in the description. But let's go ahead and get right into my list of the most disappointing books that I read last month. The first book I'm going to speak about is The Paleontologist by 𝚆𝙾𝙽𝙃𝙷. I do think that it had a really interesting concept, but I think this one needed a little more of something than what we got. I do think that this book is very original. There is an aspect of this book that has to do with ghost dinosaurs. We are following the main character of this book, who is a paleontologist. When he was a child, him and his sister went to a museum of history together. His younger sister disappeared from this museum. Nobody knows what happened to her, and he starts going down this rabbit hole trying to discover what happened to his sister. I just really feel like this book needed a lot of editing. At the end of the book, we have a villain monologue. It's pretty much all telling, no showing, where the villain of the book kind of like takes off their mask. It was too long for no reason, especially towards the end. The book ends, we get our wrap-up reveal, and then there was still several chapters of this book that goes on and on and on, where it felt like this book was never going to end. The next book I have to talk about is Last to Leave the Room by Caitlin Starling. This was one of my really highly anticipated releases. For that reason, that is the only reason why I did not DNF this book, is because I was so excited for it. Really, right away in this book, I was immediately turned off because I did listen to the audiobook of this, and this book is narrated by my least favorite audiobook narrator. The more and more books I've listened to from them, I just do not like their very dry, monotone way of speaking. They're very mechanical, almost lifeless. It took this story, which already was very dry, very flat, and it was like a mind-numbing combination. This is another one that just was so boring to me. This book really isn't even that long, but it just drags and drags, and it's another book with a super interesting concept, but it doesn't get interesting until like the last 3% of the book. This is like a doppelganger trope. Our main character has this door in her basement, and when she opens it up, this doppelganger comes out. It's just so dry and boring watching the main character interacting with this doppelganger, and it feels like she just goes through these repetitive days throughout the entire book, and nothing interesting happens until the very, very end. The next disappointing book I read in November is A Haunting on the Hill by Elizabeth Hand. I rated this book 3 out of 5 stars. I do have an entire reading vlog speaking about this book, so if you are interested in that, I will also leave that linked in the description so you can see my entire reading journey reading this book. The next book I have to talk about is Hex Education by Maureen Kilmer. I really enjoyed Suburban Hell by Maureen Kilmer, so this is another situation similar to Last to Leave the Room, where I really enjoyed the previous book by the author, and I was so excited for their new release. And Hex Education did not really do it for me. I really struggle a lot of times with which books. I don't know why that is, and it's not all the times. Like, a couple of my very favorite books are which books. The first half of this book, again, it was very boring, versus Suburban Hell, which had these really immersive moments. It also did not have any horror in it at all, versus Suburban Hell, which did have a couple very creepy moments. And I really expected more from this one because of my experience reading her debut novel. The next book I have to talk about is Beholder by Ryan LaSala. And once again, okay, I didn't realize the trend, but the trend in this video is books where I loved the first book I read from that author, and the new 2023 release was a major flop for me. And yet again, Beholder is another scenario of that, because I loved Ryan LaSala's book, The Honeys. Amazing. Amazing horror, beautiful poetic writing. Nothing in Beholder came even close to that. I think a huge reason for me that this book was a major flop is it has such a strong romance. Like, if you don't like reading romance, don't pick up this book because it's a huge focus, and in my opinion, this romance was not well done. It was very cheesy. It was insta love. These characters, they see each other and then they're instantly into each other. Some of the dialogue too in this book was pretty rough. The dialogue was strange to me because it really shifts in tone very awkwardly, where we're following our main character who has had this super crazy traumatic thing just happen to them, and then they immediately go on the run. So this whole time we've been following them, they're very scared, they're serious, they're trying to figure out what's going on. And then when this cheesy insta-love romance comes up, there's this really awkward, strange, abrupt shift in tone where these two characters start interacting and there's dialogue between them. And we see the main character go from being very serious and scared to really awkwardly flirting with the other character. I do want to say though, Ryan 𝙲𝚃 is really good at doing body horror. I think he has a skill for writing body horror. The next most disappointing book I read was The Hike by Lucy Clark. This is one of those books that gets me because of the fact that it's going to be set in the wilderness and it's going to have an aspect of a survival story to it. I think what I really look for in books, what I really love, is when a book is really set in the now and we're seeing things actually happening, going on with the characters, and not just characters sitting around having conversations with each other, reminiscing, and like flashbacks and backstory. I think I really look for in a book when it's set in the present and the now. It was way too much talk and not enough action. Too much of these characters twiddling their thumbs and la-di-dying, and not enough thrills and stuff actually happening, stuff that was moving the plot forward. I feel like this book had way too much exposition. It takes 20% of this book, 15 chapters into this book, and we are still not into the hike. This book is called The Hike. How is that possible? All the details about the background and lives of these characters, that doesn't add anything to the story. It's not what I came into this book for. There was like 5 chapters of epilogue and wrap up. There was no ominous survival tension being built into this book. It was just so much talking. The next book I have to talk about is Sunburn by Laura Lippman. I actually picked this book up at a little free library and I wanted to give it a try. I wasn't hugely disappointed with this one. I rated it a 3 out of 5 star. It's not the worst book I've ever read, but it's nothing that is gonna stick with me. It's a book that I'm gonna end up donating to another little free library. I do like this aspect sometimes about certain thrillers where it's the kind of book where you can just read them and like shut everything else off. Like, you barely even have to pay attention. You can just fly through it because there's not a lot going on in the story. I did think the main character was very interesting. I liked seeing certain things explored with her character, but it just, I'm gonna lower this to a 2. I'm gonna lower this to a 2 because no, this is not a 3-star. This is a 2-star book. It's an unlikable female protagonist domestic thriller similar to 1,000 other books that are on the market. And I can see a lot of people enjoying this one, but it didn't do anything much for me and didn't stand out or impress me much. So yeah, would not recommend it. At least unless you really enjoy domestic suspense and thrillers. The final book that I have to talk about is another one that I really did not hate, but it did not deserve to rank in my best of video. This is one that I literally have like forgotten everything about. That book is The Islands of Elsewhere by Heather Fawcett. And I believe this is actually the same author of, what is it, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is the same author who wrote that book, and this is actually a standalone middle grade book. I enjoyed this one, but I wasn't blown away by it. It was pretty average, didn't stand out to me very much, although it was a very easy and quick read. Yeah, this is a book that I'm not gonna sit here and try to talk about because I have like nothing to say. It was okay. Not a must read. Those are all of the most disappointing books that I read in the month of November. If you want to see me rant about a couple more disappointing books that I read over the course of the year, I would recommend checking out this video next. I love a good rant, okay? And I have read my fair share of flops and duds this year. Definitely check out this video next.